Grab your popcorn, find your seats, and get ready, because this episode of the Cinema Spotlight is about to begin. Subscribe if you're new, and please, enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to the Cinema Spotlight. This is the show where we dissect all things movies, TV, and everything in between. I am your host and self-proclaimed media expert, James Sena. It's our holiday episode of the show, so along with your popcorn, feel free to grab yourself a cup of hot chocolate and cuddle up in your favorite blanket and fuzzy socks. In today's episode, we'll head things off with the Oscar watch, followed by a segment of A Deeper Dive. And lastly, you'll see when we get there. Here is an official spoiler warning for any and all content discussed here today, and if you wish to skip around to avoid spoilers, you can find timestamps in the description both on YouTube and Spotify for your convenience. That said, let's shine a spotlight on the Holdovers.
Oscar watch. Oscar watch.
So before I say anything else, if you have never even heard of this movie, that's okay. I may or may not have mentioned this on the show before, but I happen to work at a cinema, so if it wasn't for the people walking out of this movie saying, this movie was absolutely amazing, it has similar feeling to Good Will Hunting, which, by the way, is my favorite film of all time at the current time of recording, so that for me is a huge selling point, but if it wasn't for that, this film probably wouldn't even have been on my radar. It probably just would have been a film that I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I heard it was good and, didn't really pique my interest enough to get me to watch it. But this movie, for me, became a huge must-watch because of its focus on character relationships. And this is despite the fact that before its release, it went relatively unknown. And that's, of course, I'm noticing this trend recently, especially, until people started actually watching it, giving reviews, word of mouth saying, hey, this movie is actually pretty good. That's what helps sometimes figure out what is a good movie and what's not, is word of mouth. Are people talking about it? A lot of movies, if they're not that good, people they'll watch it and then they just won't say anything. But if a movie is really good, they're gonna make a point to say something. When someone comes up to you and says, this movie had me crying, it was amazing, you have to see it, that to me strikes more of a chord. So anyways, on to the next little thing. This film is 2 hours and 13 minutes long, which I'm only noting because last episode we did just discuss the significance of a movie's runtime, but also, hey, this is an example of a movie that is good, that is not 3 hours long. It's just over 2 hours, which, again, 2 hours is pretty standard for how long a movie is. Now, I unfortunately can't say that I went into this movie completely blind, but my expectations were very high, and I can happily say that they were met and exceeded. So, let's talk about a synopsis and our main players here. So, the movie is directed by Alexander Payne. In the lead roles, we have Paul Giamatti as Paul Hunnam, Dominic Sessa as Angus Tully, and Divine Joy Randolph as Mary Lamb. Those are the three main leads, and there are other characters, of course, but I mentioned these main leads mostly. I think I've explained this before in past episodes, but these would be the Oscar contenders unless I explicitly say otherwise. Now, what is the movie about? It's Christmas break, and teacher Paul Hunnam is tasked with watching over all the students being held over at Fairhaven High School, which is a boarding school that is worthy of note. Because these kids, they go to the school, they don't see their family until Christmas break. So this is a big deal that they're being held over. He is not particularly liked, the teacher we're talking about here, and is certainly a rough around the edges type of guy. Angus Tully is a student who, for reasons I'll leave out for spoiler purposes, is forced to become a holdover at the very last second due to we'll say a family conflict. Throughout the movie, Paul and Angus butt heads and are frequently at odds, kind of getting in each other's way, but over time they garner a respect and understanding for each other. Mary, who is pivotal in the development of their relationship, is a school lunch lady, I think would be the right way to say it, who tragically lost her son. I believe so it was pretty recent in the story. It was yeah, because there was a whole scene about that. It was like a fresh wound. And the story basically surrounds these three characters as they all come to terms with their past traumas together. And this movie really just is a holiday movie of different people coming together and respecting each other and learning how to understand each other, which I think is just a simple but very beautiful message. And that's sort of it aside from plot. And I'm obviously leaving out a lot of details, but on a baseline, this film focuses on interpersonal relationships between characters from different backgrounds. It's branded as a comedy and a little bit of drama, and while it made me laugh out loud plenty of times, it also made me cry plenty of times. Now, this is one of the bits of spoiler. One of my favorite lines from this movie is right at the end, so fast forward like 10 seconds if you don't want to hear it, but there's like a whole thing that happens where Hunnam basically refers to the principal of the boarding school as what did he say? As penis cancer in human form, which to me is just, I don't know why, it's the way he delivered it. It was just absolutely hilarious. And I'll say this now, while 100%, I see the connection to Good Will Hunting, and I'll explain exactly what I mean later on in the episode, but this film absolutely stands on its own and is well worth the watch. And I'm going to give you my rating right now, so brace yourself because we're coming in hot. I'm giving this film a 9.4 out of 10. Yeah, if you're keeping track with the ratings so far for this upcoming Oscars, you'll see Holdovers is currently at the top of my I'll say favorite movie list. I think it's the best movie that I've reviewed so far on here. However, I would say it's definitely a little biased because it's my favorite so far, and it's definitely my favorite of the year so far as well. Now, let's break down the good and the bad to determine how exactly I came to that score. So, as I like to do, we'll start with the bad, which for me is solely nitpicks. And if you're wondering why I start with the bad, it's literally because the way that I like to format it, and of course I'm always breaking the fourth wall with all of you, I keep things very transparent. The bad is easier to get through, especially with certain movies, but especially for one like this, where there's just so much good to talk about, I like to get the bad out of the way. And when there's a lot of bad or a lot of nitpicks or a lot of critiques, I actually think that those make for more interesting discussion. But oftentimes there's so much to talk about that I'm trying to really juggle like what I think is the most important to cover. So anyways, with that being said, let's get right into it. With the bads, there was a scene, not a very long one, but there was a scene where Angus and Paul go to a bowling alley. If you've seen the movie at this point, which I hope you have, hope you paused the episode and went and watched the movie, came back. There's a scene where they go to a bowling alley. Angus teaches Paul how to, or hunt. I have Paul written in my notes. He's more referred to as Hunnam, but he teaches Hunnam how to bowl, and it's a very sweet and wholesome moment. But then it keeps going, and then we eventually get a scene with Hunnam at a bar interacting with someone who's dressed as Santa, and he kind of nerds out and says that, oh, well, that costume of Santa isn't actually accurate, and instead you would be dressed with sandals and open-toed shoes and whatever he said. And I'm going to be honest, this was seemingly set up for a joke. This whole segment, I think, was just meant to be a lighthearted, wholesome, but like a funny joke quip. And I'm going to be honest, this particular joke didn't really land for me. Now, does that mean that any joke that doesn't land should have been cut? No, but I think the issue I had with this scene is all it really did was just provide a couple more wholesome moments between the two, and like that was sort of it. It didn't add necessarily any character growth, and the scene itself went on for about 10 minutes or so, which, hey, I mean, I said it was a nitpick. It's not that deep, really, but, I'm telling you any little nitpicks that I see, and this is the type of thing that I see. If I see a scene that doesn't really contribute to the plot, I'm going to call it out, as I always do. Even a movie I really like, I'm going to call it out. And I feel like teaching Paul how to bowl could have been part of a montage. So maybe I would stitch that scene with, like, there's one where Angus is ice skating, but it's kind of shown, there's like music and there's a little bit of a montage. That would have been a good, like, you just stitch it together, make a montage of wholesome moments rather than, like, do a quick little sped up scene with him ice skating and then cut to a bowling, or I don't remember which scene came first. But like, don't just cut to an entire scene that is basically just the ice skating scene, but longer with unnecessary dialogue. That to me was like, probably could have done without it. And I think it would have helped the pacing a little bit of the movie, at least for that one little area. Because I think that would have been in Act 2, we're getting more of these characters interacting, and I think that there were so many juicy parts in Act 1 and 3 that Act 2 had a little bit too many just characters just existing, which I think is fine if you're into that. But, again, just nitpicking here. I gave the movie a 9.4, so it's really, I really am not taking that many points off for that. But, yeah, so one of the only other grievances that I noticed is that at the beginning of the film, a father of one of the kids being held over comes up and kind of scoops up his kid and then ends up taking all the other held over kids in his helicopter, leaving Angus as the only kid left. So this is like a big part, and I understand why that had to happen, because for the purposes of writing the movie, it was done so that Angus, Paul, and Mary were the only three left, basically. But I felt like there must have been another way to write them out of the story, because it felt a little abrupt that the dad just all of a sudden flew in on a helicopter, and not only that, but took the rest of the kids with him for seemingly little reason aside from, like, oh, just so that you're not here. And then I also don't really understand, like, the reason why Angus doesn't go with them is because Angus is trying to reach his parents, and the parents were like just not picking up. So Angus kind of had to stay back, and that sort of like drives the plot forward. But I don't know, there was just, maybe it's more of like a feeling about it. I didn't like how abrupt it was, and it felt like just a real cop-out to just be like, okay, well, we need Angus and Paul and Mary to be the central focus point. So we need all the other kids to just kind of leave the story. Let's write it so that the other kid's dad comes and picks him up, instead of doing something a little different where maybe Angus was the only one that was left behind, or maybe there were like a couple of fewer kids that were left behind, and their reason for leaving all varied. It just felt a little out of the blue, because none of the kids seemingly were friends with each other. So it was a little random, and I also quite like some of the interactions with Angus and the younger boys. I think it displayed his compassionate side really well, the side where one of the kids wets his bed because he's like really sad or really scared or whatever it was, and Angus is like comforting him. It's a really good scene. So I almost wonder if it would have been better if some of the kids actually did stick around for the plot. And I don't know if that would have changed the story if there were like one or two other kids that were there. I don't think it would have. So I think for me it was like a little weird. It was like digestible, I was able to watch it and be like, okay, like, sure, I get it. But also I think it could have been done a little bit differently. But again, it's hard to say if more of these interactions anyway would have made the film better, but going from just a larger ensemble to a pretty small one, like with the snap of a finger, it just felt a little jarring to me. But yeah, I mean, I'm content with how it was done, so I'm not gonna, press about it too much. Now, if I had to say one more critique, I would say that I wish we saw more of Naheem Garcia's character, Danny, a little bit more. Danny was the janitor of the boarding school, and I would say, like, he seemingly had a thing for Mary. There was like a little subplot there where it seemed like he was sort of flirting But the thing is, we didn't see that many interactions with them. We saw like one or two where he was kind of like, was being very, not provocative. Well, no, that's not the right way to say it. But there were a couple scenes where it was very clear that he was flirting with Mary. And to me, it came off just a tad creepy because beforehand, we didn't really get a lot of interactions. I think all that was needed was like one extra scene of just them talking or showing that they are friendly with each other. Or there's a scene where Hunnam just goes all out and like really defends Mary against one of the students being a little doofus. And I think it maybe could have worked if like Danny was there backing him up or something, because it really, like, I don't think his portrayal of Danny was bad at all. I thought it was great, but it felt a little weird because we didn't really know what that dynamic was. We didn't know if that was like a friendship, if it was platonic. It seemed romantic, but we didn't see enough of it to make it not creepy. And like, she's a grieving mother. She's grieving the fact that her son is not like alive with her during this holiday season, and he's trying to flirt. So it just felt out of place. It felt a little out of pocket. It made it so that Danny was a lot less likable, in my opinion, but maybe that was the intent. I'm not really sure. Again, just a small nitpick, because I don't think Danny's character is that important, but, you know, a slightly bigger role for him could have benefited the story. But the story was never really about him to begin with, so I kind of get it, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, that's actually it for the bad, or at least, you know, as I'm preparing all my notes and talking, like, those are really the only things that came to mind as far as something that bothered me. And I've seen people online criticizing some of the younger actors, so I'm going to talk about that really quick. I actually thought that the acting across the board was solid, and that includes the child actors, which there's always going to be issues with the child actors. Like, a lot of people are, if there's child actors, people start to get hesitant about the whole movie because they're like, maybe they'll take it out of the movie, or they'll take, you know what I mean? So, but I thought they were all fine. I thought they did what they needed to do. They were in the movie just long enough where, you know, if they were meant to be like a little shit, they portrayed that properly, or if they were meant to be innocent, they portrayed that properly. So for me, the acting across the board in the movie, and this includes Naheem Garcia as Danny, I want to make it very clear, I'm not criticizing his portrayal of Danny. I think that we needed one extra scene with Danny there in order to make the rest of his character make sense. And I think if you took out that bowling scene, that's exactly where that 10 minutes could have gone. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, speaking of acting, let's talk about the Oscars, because this is genuinely an Oscar contender. And I'm going to bring this up multiple times, but the nominations for the Golden Globes is here. It's a thing that exists now. So we have some sort of basis to go off of now for this, which is very, very fun. And this point last year, I believe I didn't have this as something I could lean on for determining this type of stuff. But hey, you know, there's a first for everything. Welcome to season 2, wherever. But anyways, first up, it wouldn't shock me if Paul Giamatti gets a nomination for Best Actor. Now, what is standing in his way? In my opinion, it is the absurdly difficult competition for that category. If he gets a nom, in my opinion, he is very, very deserving of the nomination, but unlikely to win it. And you might be thinking, James, there's absurd competition for that category? Yes, very much so. The Golden Globes did a great job of showing that. But let me just list off a few performances that we've already talked about on the show, and some that could come into play here. Because obviously everyone's talking about Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer. I haven't done my Oppenheimer review yet. That is in the works, so don't you worry. I will review it eventually. But, and, you know, without going too much into detail on it, because I will talk about it at some point, Cillian Murphy did get nominated for a Golden Globe. Will we see him get nominated for an Oscar? I think it's almost certain. It's very certain. Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon. I talked about the fact that he could get a nomination. He got nominated for a Golden Globe. He's going to be in the running there. Again, another movie that if you're following on Instagram, you know that I've seen it, and I am writing a review for that one as well. Saltburn, Barry Keoghan. He was phenomenal in Saltburn. I'll leave it there because I'll leave that for the review. But he will likely get a nomination as well as there's just so much competition for Best Actor every year. This year it's already stacked. So if Giamatti doesn't get a nomination, it's, that's why. It's not a knock on his acting. It's just a boost on the competition this year, which is pretty stiff. However, I think Da'Vine Joy Randolph could easily get a nomination for Mary. She was absolutely incredible, and she did get a nomination for the Golden Globes, whereas Paul Giamatti did not. So there's already a precursor, or whatever, showing that there's some sort of, what's the not prior knowledge? You know what I'm trying to say. She's already nominated for this, which means that she could get nominated for an Oscar. She's probably in the conversations. Now, will she win it? And I would say, considering that it would be as supporting actress, I actually think she's got a solid shot, and I am rooting for her. I think she absolutely could deserve it. And she's got some competition, but there's no clear frontrunner for that category. So we could see it go her way. I think that there's some competition from like Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer is what I saw. Color Purple is going to be a big one that could stand in her way. But if the Academy is trying to give something to Holdovers, I could easily see it going to Da'Vine Joy Randolph, easily. And, just to shout out, because I haven't really talked about her much in this review, holy moly, her performance was just so good. Every scene she was in, she stole, in my opinion. And that one kitchen scene where she's got the tears in her eyes and she's like, he's gone. And just that scene, like, I started crying in the theater, and I don't usually cry in the theater. That scene got me. It got me, and for that, I think if she wins it, or I hope she wins it, but she's definitely got a shot for a nomination. I think a nomination for Best Original Screenplay or even Best Picture makes a lot of sense. Granted, I don't think Holdovers will win either of them, but I think a nomination feels super likely to me. I just don't think a holiday movie like this is necessarily super likely for like a Best Picture winner, but again, it was nominated for the Golden Globe for best best comedy or musical, I think, in one of those categories. So the fact that it got a nomination there, and there's 10 nomination spots to fill for Best Picture, I would be baffled if it didn't at least receive a nomination. You know what I mean? Like, I think it could easily get a nomination. That might not lead to a win, but yeah, we're talking nominations here. We don't know what the nominations are. When the nominations get announced, I'll start talking about who I think will actually win. Now, a couple other categories just to consider. I think a nomination for Best Costumes could be in play. With based on what I've heard, there was such extensive research done to reimagine what life was like in the 70s at that time. So yeah, did I even mention that this is a period piece? It absolutely is. Every single thing in the movie was reworked and designed to look like the 70s, the early 70s, which is very, very apparent, and it's just so well done, and with so much thought and care into everything that you saw. I think I think a nomination absolutely makes a lot of sense. And granted, I don't know enough about costuming, so maybe it won't get a nomination, but I would like to see it get nominated because it was very clear from based on what I heard that there was so much thought and effort put into that. Now, I think this actually goes hand in hand with Best Cinematography, because this entire film has the charm of a seasonal classic with the same graininess that the films of the 90s had, like Home Alone and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, those movies didn't have like high definition like types of camera work. It was shot very intentionally to feel like a movie that came way earlier on, like years ago, which the fact that it really does feel like that made the movie so much better, so much more lovable. And I think easily Best Cinematography. Actually, I'll clarify here. I believe it goes under Best Cinematography. I don't think it goes under Best Editing. I don't think so, or something having to do with that. If someone knows for sure what the use of the camera in this and what the vision looks like with the types of lens that was used. Can someone clarify in the comments, if you're aware of the answer to this, what category would that fall under? Because I think a nomination is imminent, and I actually think a win makes so much sense, because there was so much thought and intention put behind that I think it has to be rewarded in some way. But yeah, other than that, I mean, when I eventually do my official Oscar nomination predictions, I'll add more context to these thoughts, and I'll compare and contrast different performances once I've given more reviews. But did you see The Holdovers? If you had any thoughts about The Holdovers that weren't addressed here, please drop them in the comments or DM me on Instagram. That's all the time we have for this first segment, but I'll close with this. The Holdovers is currently my #1 movie of the year, and I beg for not another Banshees of Inisherin situation where it's an amazing movie that gets nominated a bunch and then doesn't win anything. Please give this film one freaking Oscar, please. And I think it'll go to Divine Joy Randolph. I really do think so, but we'll leave that here. If she, this is, by the way, when I'm recording this is like before Christmas. Oscar nominations haven't even happened. If she wins the Oscar, I mean, come on. That deserves a subscribe button, right? I mean, but anyways, on that note, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper into the character relationships in The Holdovers and movies in general. We will be right back. Which movies do you want mentioned on the Oscar Watch? Let us know on Instagram at _cinema_spotlight, and drop a follow while you're there to get updates, behind the scenes details, and to participate in polls following each episode. Now, let's get back to the show. I realized something recently about some of these podcast episodes, specifically with the Oscar watches, where I do my best to review the films through the lens of could it win an Oscar? And that's not going to change, but especially with the film like The Holdovers, I feel like I'm not giving myself the time to really dig in and have these deeper conversations that I would like to have. Some of these movies are just, there's so much to talk about, and when I limit myself to a certain amount of time, unfortunately that causes some topics to not be expanded upon, which I want to try to change. For example, last episode, which you should check out if you haven't seen it yet, by the way, we dove into a film's runtime and how that relates to Killers of the Flower Moon and how that affects the movie. While this may not occur for every episode in the future, I want to officially title this second segment A Deeper Look, where we navigate the often overlooked aspects of film that I deem worthy of a deeper discussion. So, with that being said, as I mentioned in the previous segment, one of the strongest aspects of The Holdovers is the interpersonal relationships between the characters. I want to expand on that a little bit more and draw comparisons to character relationships in other films and just kind of discuss it in a general manner. So before I talk about the specific relationships in this movie and why they work so well, I just want to talk about what am I talking about when I'm talking about these interpersonal relationships and why this movie focuses on it so much where other films don't necessarily. So there's different kinds of character relationships that exist, and I have a couple jotted down here. There's familial, so you have like father and mother, father and father, mother and mother. You have parent and child, child and child, brother, brother, sister, sister, aunt, niece, or, all these different familial relationships. That's one type of relationship that happens, and they can be explored in a variety of ways. So that's just one thing: familial, family. Another one is romantic. This one I see overdone a lot. It's specifically in certain movies when it comes to man-woman relationships where they can't have a conversation that isn't meant to be romantic, which is not always the case. I am aware of that. However, I do think that romantic relationships are a very easy one because it's a very simple way, straightforward way to create a little bit of stakes where these characters are romantic with each other and that is their dynamic. And It's straightforward. I think you can make it incredibly complex depending on the film itself. And there are a lot of interesting ways to play around with it, but it is a very common character relationship. I would say the most common types of character relationships are familial and romantic. I have here platonic, so that is friend and friend. This one's also pretty common. You'll always have in a movie the main character has some sort of friend that they go to, and they try to explain to their friend what's going on, and that is typically a way to get insight on what the character's thinking. That's how platonic relationships are used more often than not. Platonic also is very common among side characters. When you have characters that aren't the main characters that need to have a conversation in order to, once again, clue the audience in on something. That's how platonic relationships are utilized, and again, they're pretty common. Now, there's one last one, which is not super common, and that is strangers interacting in movies. Strangers with potentially similar backgrounds, or strangers with very different backgrounds. This is super fascinating to me, because this is the type of relationships that I feel like are explored in the Holdovers. Hunnam and Angus are similar in a lot of ways. They bond over the fact that, Angus has to take his antidepressants, and Hunnam sees that he's taking the antidepressants, and it's revealed that he is actually on the same antidepressants as Angus. So they have that interesting connection between the two of them, which is displayed through the type of medication that they both use, which I find super, super profound and really, really fascinating, and just a really nice touch on the type of connection that they have. So let's talk about Angus and Paul a little bit. What makes their connection so good? And I actually compared this movie, it said a similar vibe to Good Will Hunting. I've heard someone say that this movie is more like Dead Poet Society. I don't feel that way. I think Good Will Hunting is a better comparison, because we're talking about a certain type of character relationship where the relationship between Angus and Paul, or Angus and Hunnam, however you wanted to refer to him as, is very similar to Robin Williams and Matt Damon's characters in Good Will Hunting, where they're not familial. They're not. Because they're not related to each other. They're definitely not romantic. You could say platonic, but I guess you could say platonic. Platonic and then strangers is a little bit there. It's interesting. They're a little different, because platonic to me is more friends. That's more like what it is. It's like two friends interacting, or two people that know each other. Robin Williams' character and Matt Damon's character, they didn't know each other, and they're talking to each other not really of either one of them, neither one of their decisions. Now, Will Hunting doesn't actually even want to talk to this therapist, but it's a relationship between a therapist and their what would you call someone who's getting therapy? Is that just a therapy, or I don't know what you would call that, but yeah, I mean, it's the relationship between a therapist and their patient, so to speak, which weirdly is kind of like the relationship between Hunnam and Angus, where they don't really know each other. They know of each other, but they don't have that relationship. They don't know each other. They are strangers to each other, and throughout this film, they're learning more about each other, and that's how they garner respect, because they go about their lives kind of having assumptions about each other, and then they learn more about each other, and that's how they build this bond, which I think is super interesting. And it's not a type of relationship that's often explored, because it takes a lot of intention to be able to expand upon that. When you're doing a film, and for example, let's pick a random movie. I don't know, Spider-Man, sure. One of the Spider-Man movies, doesn't matter which one. The movie is about Spider-Man. It's about him needing to defeat a villain and save the day. There's no point throughout this movie where it's really necessary for Spider-Man to have a relationship with someone that, like, if there was someone that, for example, was a police officer that he didn't know, and that's how he builds a relationship with the police officer, and the movie would then become about Spider-Man and the police officer. That's not what Spider-Man's about. It focuses on the story. It focuses on the action, on the rising of the conflict, setting stakes for itself. It's a different type of movie altogether. In a rom-com, it's gonna be romantic relationship. For different kinds, if you're talking about a thriller, you can talk about types of relationships between characters, but very, very rarely is it going to be relationship between strangers, especially one on a wholesome level like Paul and Angus. So it's a very interesting and unique type of connection that these two characters have. Now, let's incorporate Mary into this, because Paul and Mary, and then Angus and Mary, in very different ways, they protect Mary and she protects them. For example, when one of the students, I can't remember the student's name, but basically talks about how Mary is a awful chef, and she's awful at her job and everything, and she, doesn't deserve the job that she has and everything. Paul really puts his foot down and is like, you don't get it. Like, don't say about that. You have no idea what she's going through. He defends her. And Mary heard that, of course. And then in a different scenario, like in that kitchen scene where they're at that dinner party and Mary's in the kitchen crying, it's Angus immediately that has her back and is like, hey, Hunnam, like, you need to come help here. So, and he's looking out for her. He goes and he helps her with her family, or taking her up and helping her see her family and everything. And Mary kind of does the same for them. When Paul is going at Angus, Mary will say, hey, listen, you don't know what he's going through. You're telling to him that he doesn't know what I'm going through. You don't know what he's going through. You don't ever tell a kid who is left at school without his parents even picking up the phone to make sure that he's okay. You don't tell a kid who's abandoned like that he doesn't understand life, or that you don't want to have anything to do with him. Telling someone who has just been abandoned that you want nothing to do with them is one of the worst things you can say. And she correctly points that out and really lays into him, and she pushes back on that. And that's the type of character that Mary is. And it's the way that these three interact, because they all understand, okay, listen, we are all going through this Christmas break together in very different ways, but we need to be able to support each other because we're all going through something right now. All three of them are battling depression for different reasons entirely. Mary for the loss of her son, Angus because he feels abandoned by his parents, and then Paul because he feels like he has nothing left to offer in life, which is a very, very existential and very dark but beautiful topic to try to explore. And I think that, between these three characters, there's just so much potential there for such new and unique conversations that we don't get to see in movies a lot. So yeah, so that's what I want to say about that. I love when writers create new dynamic character relationships in their narratives, because in our everyday lives, it's not as cookie cutter as many movies will make it out to be. Every person is different, and the Holdovers truly excels at putting this on display, showing how all kinds of different people interact with each other, and really just laying out this message of, like, when you see someone on the street, you don't know what they've been through. When you're talking to even someone in a familial, romantic, platonic, no matter what the bond is, you don't know what their past is. And especially if you don't know what their past is, you should not be the first to cast a stone against them. So it's just a really beautiful message, and that's really what the Holdovers really expands upon in this movie, and I had to talk about that. So with that, we're actually going to go ahead and move on to our final ad break, but don't go away, because we're going to talk about some movies for the holidays in just a little bit. If you are enjoying the show so far, please remember to check out the episode playlist on Spotify. Also, leave a rating and subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. Wouldn't that be a shame? Break time's over. Time for the final part of the show. Welcome back to the final segment of the episode, and we're gonna have some fun, okay? We've had some academic conversations today, and we need to loosen up a little bit. So I got my drink right in front of me. I'm drinking some rum chata for the holidays. Cheers, das vidania, you know, everything. Astrovia, whatever the terminology is. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good stuff. So, you might be wondering, James, what are you doing? Well, I couldn't think of what to do for this final segment. So I figured I'd pour myself a little drink and I would just kind of talk, but about holiday movies, Christmas movies. We're going to do a make my movie, like a my movie segment, except kind of not really. I'm not going to be doing the randomization thing. I'm just going to say what I like about Christmas movies and just go on like a little tangent for like a little bit. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, James, that's pretty lazy of you as a host. You should always come prepared to each episode. Well, that's true. But if I script out everything that I ever talk about, and I always do my little, I'm just going to consult my notes here, that's less fun, right? And it prevents me from showing off my ability to, yeah, I can go off script a little bit, you know? So you'll hear some creaking in chairs. You'll hear me shifting in my seat, taking a little drink. I'm just gonna let's talk about holiday movies, okay? Now, for me, The Polar Express was not only one of the first Christmas movies that I've ever seen, but it was one of the first movies I've ever seen in an actual theater. It was one of those like pull away, like the curtains would like move to the side. I remember it very vaguely, but I was like 5 or 6 when that movie came out, and I remember at the time we thought that was revolutionary, and it's really not. Like, or I mean, sorry, it was, but like, because some of it was mocap. But if you go back and watch The Polar Express, like now, you realize how many little CGI and animation errors that there actually are, which is kind of part of the charm if you really think about it. So let's go through and let's just talk about The Polar Express. Why is it a must-watch for people? And so I'm like, this is me coming up with a segment literally on the spot. Why is The Polar Express a must-watch Christmas movie? Because there are some must-watches, right? You got The Polar Express, you got Elf. Elf is a big one. A Christmas Story, you know, you shoot your eye out, kid. That one. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Admittedly, a little less quotable now that I think about it. And then there's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Or, is that the full title? Or it might just be The Grinch with Jim Carrey. Yeah, these are all iconic. All iconic Christmas movies that you must have seen. The Nightmare Before Christmas. Would you count that as a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie? Let me know in the comments down below. And here's the thing, right? Oh, actually, there was a Christmas movie that I saw recently, and I really needed to knock it off my list because I had heard a lot of really cool things. I saw some like TikTok trends using like clips from this movie. You know, give a shout if you've heard of Rise of the Guardians. It's I believe it was DreamWorks, and it's really cool actually. But anyways, I'm jumping all over the place with this. The Polar Express, right? Did you know that Tom Hanks played like 3 or 4 characters in that movie? He was the conductor, which that one was obvious. I believe he was the voice of the dad. He was also the voice of Santa, I think. Could be wrong about that one. And then there's also like, I don't know if the character had a name, but he was like the hobo that was like on top of the train with the weird hot chocolate. He was like, it's a hot cup of joe. Actually, wait. So was it? It might have been coffee, actually, now that I think about it. But anyways, all right. We're 4.5 minutes into the segment. Time for another drink. Ready? Cheers. Okay. So, what is my favorite Christmas movie of all time? I kid you not. I think The Holdovers might be now. Because it genuinely put such a nice, warm feeling in my heart when I walked out of that movie. It just made me feel good. It elevated my mood for the entire day. If a movie can do that, it's successful. And granted, there are a lot of Christmas movies that do that. But like, I've seen Polar Express at this point so many times where I'm like, do I still love that movie? Although I will say, I compare, if you really want to get under someone's skin, you compare them to the kid with the yellow pajamas going like, oh, all I got was stupid underwear. Like that kid. Yeah, like that's That character single-handedly branded an entire subspecies of human. And I think that there's something about that that really speaks volumes. That this movie kind of was like, oh yeah, there are kids like that. I know one. And it's just, it had to be yellow pajamas too. You know what I mean? Now, for me, the main character was never that likable. He always was schemy. And I think it was... Actually, do any of these characters have names? Now that I think about it. He's just the annoying kid with the glasses and the yellow pajamas. And then there's the girl, you know, with the pink dress. She's like one of the main characters. And then there's the boy that doesn't know how to wear a bathrobe correctly, apparently, because he's always ripping the pockets. I mean, just come on. It's not that hard to figure out what to do with it. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, James, is there a point to this segment? You said we're going to talk about some holiday films. I was looking for some recommendations. Are you now? Okay. I didn't realize this was the recommendation channel. This isn't the cinema spotlight. This is cinema recommendations. Okay. I probably could have come up with something clever, but that's okay. How many Christmas movies do we need? Because I was thinking about it. There's really only a handful of ones that you need. It's the ones that I've already mentioned a little bit before. And then just Hallmark Christmas movies are another brand of joy. If you've ever seen a Hallmark Christmas movie, man, that's... Some people might say that that's porno level acting. I honestly, it's like the Hallmark films, they're kind of wild because you never know what's going to happen next. I watched a movie recently with my roommate, shout out Sophie, and it was, I forget, it was like something, I don't even know what it was called, okay? But it was a Hallmark movie and it was very, very evidently so, right? And the crux of this movie was that there was this girl and she was going back home because she finally decided that she was in love with this guy. And then she like bumps into this other guy on a bench who is now in this hometown to see a girl that he wants to try to win back or something. So they're in like similar positions. And then they go, and I think they find out that the people that they're going to try to win back already have couples. So they pretend to be a couple so that they can make them jealous. And then use each other to like win back the people that they actually love. And then they realize, plot twist, oh, I'm actually developing feelings for this person. Now, if that isn't a Hallmark Christmas movie, I don't know what is. Because the level of gaslighting, social manipulation, and honestly, every Hallmark movie has some certain quotas that it needs to fulfill, right? If you've seen them, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, time for another drink. Hold on. Rum chata. It has a quota of things it needs to do. There needs to be. I think the guy... Actually, hold on. You know what? Now that I think about it, this movie did something right. It made all the characters equally a little uncomfortable. And it made the main characters the most unlikable part of the movie. Which is crazy. Because you would think it's the main character. They need a character arc to grow and learn. And that doesn't ever really happen with this movie. But there's also something that is in every Hallmark Christmas movie. That is some mother with an apron that's always cooking. And sure enough, in this movie, and they made, it was like the point of her character was, oh, I'm still cooking. I'm still getting ready for this party that we're having. Oh, I'm making cookies. Someone, like, was she doing anything other than just, it, to the point where, like, the movie actually was ironic, which I actually really enjoyed this. They cut to her having fallen asleep while making cookies. That's all her character does, is just make cookies, and then it forces, and then she'll come in and she'll be like, she like woke up from her slumber, and she went outside and she was like, oh my god, I see them proposing. That's not what was happening. She, for some weird reason, saw a ring in the coat of the guy that she was trying to like make jealous, and she goes, oh my god, he's gonna propose to her. Wouldn't it be just so wonderful if I tried the ring on for some reason? I don't know why, but that's what she did. She put the ring on her finger and she said to herself, yes, this is what I like. This is what I want. Merry Christmas to me and no one else. And she put it on and it got stuck. So instead of just grabbing some olive oil or some soap from the bathroom, she goes to the guy that she's pretending to be in love with. Hey, can you help me get this ring off? So they go outside for some reason. And then they like yank it off and he's like on one knee for some reason. And you're noticing, I'm saying for some reason. Because nothing in this movie is logical. Now, that takes us back to our original point, the Polar Express, right? Nothing in that movie is particularly logical either. I mean, a guy with a really long beard, when you yank on it, kind of makes the "ow" sound. So I could be louder, but that's like the noise that he made. I don't want to like break your ears if you're listening to this on with your headphones. But how does that? And one of my favorite all-time quotes, because one thing about the Polar Express is it is infinitely quotable. Where the one of the train, I don't know if you wouldn't call him a conductor, but he like works on the train. He just goes, "Caribou," and like you didn't need to say it like that. What accent are you trying? That's not an accent. You're just saying the word wrong. You're just caribou, and that's like the only word he says for the rest of the movie. There's the hot chocolate scene. Hot chocolate in that movie, because it's Christmas time. You gotta pay attention, all right? Follow me here. It's Christmas time. That means hot chocolate is in town, and they do the "oh, we got it, hot, hot, oh, we got it, hot chocolate." And the way he says that too is kind of fun. So what am I trying to get at with all of this? Christmas movies are not critically acclaimed films. Why? Because they don't need to be. They are meant to be goofy and wacky. Create this unrealistic universe. Why? So that anything is possible in these movies. And I weirdly think that that's sort of a beautiful idea, where if anything can happen, that's sort of like the magic of the holidays, is it not? Or specifically, one might say that the magic of Christmas is just this idea of suspending disbelief and really just doing what your heart tells you to do, is just spend time with the people that you love and care about, and throw out all logic, all anxiety, all fear, all depression, everything that happens during the course of the winter season, all of those negative thoughts, negative energy, everything that floods your head. You got to throw it out the window. You got to shake it off, because this is the time where you can throw all that out of there, and it's all about what's in your head and what's in your heart. You got to use your imagination, because realistically, that's what the Christmas season is all about. It's all about finding happiness, using your imagination, using your creativity, being with the people that you love and care about. And that's what it's really all about. That's what these movies are trying to do. So the next time you watch a Christmas movie and you think to yourself, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's a movie out there called Santa versus the Snowman, and it's literally a whole movie about Santa's army of elves versus a snowman's army of snowmen, and they're just fighting. They're actively killing each other. It's rated like G or PG or something, but they're actively killing each other. It doesn't need to be realistic. It could be as goofy or silly or whatever, because that's not the point. The point is imagination, creativity, inner peace, happiness. That's what the Christmas season is all about. That's what the holiday season is trying to bring forward to you. The holiday cheer, as we say, right? So the next time you're watching a Christmas movie, suspend your belief, really exist in the moment. Forget about the movie. Laugh about it. If something feels unrealistic, call it out. Have like with a laugh, with a smile on your face, nudge the person sitting to your right, being like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" Because that's what you're supposed to do. When you watch a movie like Elf, is it unrealistic? Of course it is. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an amazing time watching it with your family. That doesn't mean that you can't watch a Christmas movie with some of your closest friends, the people around you, and really just exist for a little bit. It's like that kid from the Polar Express, right? He rings the bell, and when he doesn't have the holiday cheer, he hears nothing. But then as soon as he kind of gives in and he realizes what it means to be with everyone during the holidays, to have that spirit, that holiday spirit, that's when he hears the bell. And I think that's a really beautiful message, and that's what Holdovers does very well. That's what a lot of really amazing holiday movies do very, very well. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Christmas movies critically are the most amazing movie, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter as long as what you're doing is with the people that you care about. So anyways, that's my little TED Talk on Christmas films. I'm going to send you on over to the outro. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Cinema Spotlight. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and if you could, take a moment to subscribe to the show on whichever platform you're listening on. I would greatly appreciate it. Be sure to follow our official Instagram at @the_cinema_spotlight for updates on when new episodes get released. And actually, if you want to go over to TikTok and follow me at JSena350, I'm going to start posting some stuff on there relating to the show, and I also do some other fun little videos over there from time to time, so go follow over there if you feel moved to. I'm going to go ahead and shut the spotlight off for now. Until next time, stay classy, friends.